Atheist Alliance International Podcast.
I don't make this stuff up.
You know, if you put Jesus Christ first, that he'll look after all your bills.
It's not fake, it's faith.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Atheist Alliance International Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Sylvester, aka Diogenes of Mayberry. And this week we're joined by podcaster and author Harris Sultan. And Harris is the author of The Curse of God. So he's here to tell us about what he does. So just before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please hit the like and subscribe button. Okay, great. Harris, thank you for joining us today. So what you tell our viewers about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me, Jason. As you said, I do a couple of shows on YouTube. I wrote a book a while ago, 2018. There it is, The Curse of God, Why I Left Islam. I've been told it's a good read. It's a page turner. So it's been translated in a few languages. Obviously, I wrote it with my background because I was born and raised in Pakistan. So obviously, when I moved to Australia back in 2003 to study, and I got my undergrad degree here, and then at the same time, you know, the so-called new atheist movement was getting really popular. So, you know, the same old story, like many people of my generation, how the end of faith and God, the God delusion, and God is not great, kind of. You know, those books, they impacted me. But so I became an atheist. I think I was a confirmed atheist by probably around 2006 or 7. But I kept it to myself. It wasn't really that big of a deal. Islam or Pakistan never really had impacted me in any negative shape or form. So it wasn't really that big of a deal for me. Like, it was just my own personal journey away from it. And then there was a crackdown of atheists back in 2017. And that's when I thought, oh, hang on a second, what's going on? So I better talk about it. And then I just started talking about it. I started a Facebook page, which kind of blew up pretty quickly. And then I created a YouTube channel. And then I created a YouTube channel in Urdu. So I was the first Pakistani atheist who started talking about these things openly in Urdu, even though it was being done in the English world. It had been going on since 2007 or 8. People like Mariam Namazi and there was another lady with her, but she obviously did most of her work in German. So people tend to forget her name. I've met her. It's embarrassing. I forgot her name. But anyway, so that was happening, but it was new for Pakistani or Indian audience to, you know, hear these things out loud. So I started doing that in Urdu, and I think I got quite a lot of views and subscribers, and now 4 or 5 years later, it's just the movement is in full flow. Yeah.
And with it being in Urdu, has the Pakistani government censored that channel in Pakistan?
Oh yeah. They do that all the time, but which is embarrassing for YouTube. YouTube does end up complying with the local laws, and they have banned my channel, but I don't know what it is, but they can still see it, not through VPN. So apparently when YouTube bans any channel in any country, so they basically ban the homepage of your channel. But people who had subscribed to me, or people who are watching or consuming that kind of a content, they would still keep on getting my videos in their recommendation feed, and they can click it and they can watch those videos, because before and after the breakdown of my audience from Pakistan, that hasn't changed at all. It's still like I get roughly around 1 million views on my Urdu channel a month, and 20 to 25% comes from Pakistan, and that hasn't changed since the ban was imposed. So when I started, I was the first one. Now there are close to 35-40 channels of ex-Muslims, who are creating content day after day in Urdu. So the movement is in full swing. They can't stop it. They understand that. I mean, what's that? What's that? It's called a developer share or something like that. Like when the first company comes in and they have this unfair share, like Uber or whatever that is. So you grab the biggest market share. So because I was the first one, so I managed to get accepted by a lot of intelligentsia or politicians, so to speak, and a lot of them contacted me. Pakistan's big-time journalists and politicians and some intellectuals as well, who I was shocked to find out that they've been atheists for a very long time, but they never spoke about it. So yeah, it's been pretty humbling to know that how you can set something in motion and how quickly it can just expand.
Correct. So so there are still people getting your content within Pakistan, as you're saying. So you can see that in your analytics. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've got probably followers outside Pakistan as well, the Pakistani diaspora who are watching your show. Then you do some shows in English as well.
Yeah, I mean, see that I created my English channel in 2018, but I didn't create my Urdu channel until 2019. Even though it should have been the other way around, but I guess even then I was still a bit nervous that are they ready to hear these things, a critique on the Quran and the Prophet? Are they ready to absorb it? But eventually, you get brazen with time, and it's just one of those things. Oh, it hasn't happened yet, so it's not going to happen. Although that's not a good approach. I always worry about my complacency. So I started that in Urdu, and it's the Urdu channel that actually exploded. With the English channel, it's been very slow. On comparatively on my English channel, in a month I get about 350, 400,000 views a month, whereas on Urdu one on average I get about 1 million. But I used to at one point I was getting like 2.5 million views a month. And majority of them were coming from India and Pakistan. But now, 3 or 4 years later, now I get letters every day. I have a whole segment of letters from Muslims becoming ex-Muslims. I get letters from all corners of Pakistan. You'd think that only people who are well-read or well-educated, only those people would be understanding your message. But I get messages from rural parts of Pakistan that I haven't even heard of. And people who haven't even finished 10 years of schooling and even relatively humble education, but even they become atheists. So it's quite humbling to see that. I've always believed that once there's if there's level playing field, then whatever idea you float, half the people are going to believe in it and the other half are not going to believe in it. There'll be some skeptics and there'll be some believers. But in Muslim countries, we see, again, I'm saying that from Pakistani perspective, and it's more or less it's true with other countries, other Islamic countries as well. You tend to, we have for example, Pakistanis boast about the fact that they've got 94% Muslims. I said, that's not a good thing. That shows that you have one-way traffic going. So if you let us speak, if you let people speak against or criticize Islam or critique Islam, then we'll see. So now, even though we don't have any proper studies done in Pakistan, I mean, Gallup in 2012, I think, said that there were 2% atheists or agnostics in Pakistan, and then the number was revised again in the latest study to 1%. But I'm quite certain that, just like that study published by Arab Barometer a year ago or 2 years ago, that I think the study compared data from 2014 and 2019, and every country, if you look at Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, all these countries had, in some cases, they had doubled the number of agnostics and atheists. Sorry, I think the number they used was non-religious people, because in these countries they don't allow you to ask this question: are you an atheist or agnostic? So we can get the idea that how in the Muslim world the focus is also shifting. What is it? We don't know. For example, in some of these places, local YouTubers are more popular than the OGs, so to speak, like Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris, and obviously they moved on as well, like Sharif Gaber in Egypt and India and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and all these countries, Iran, and the local heroes are talking about Islam from the local perspective, and those things are making big changes, bringing about big changes.
Yeah, I get the sense as well that the numbers are underreported, probably just through fear, because people are afraid to speak out. But they're there as the people who've maybe tuned into the show before and seen. I lived in Pakistan in 2018, and I met quite a few atheists who opened up to me that probably wouldn't to somebody local, but felt safe opening up to me. So they're definitely there. That's for sure.
Obviously, when I wrote this book was in 2018, and the data is already irrelevant now in this one. I think it's so I said it's on page in the introductory chapter. It says Turkey has 6%, had 6% in 2013. Now they have 10%. Malaysia, no data from 2013, but we've got 6% in 2012. Saudi Arabia, 5% in 2012. And now some numbers are putting that around 10% in Saudi Arabia as well. So these things are just, these numbers are just exploding, and people know, politicians know. It's just a matter of time when we reach that tipping point. For example, it's Pakistan is, obviously, so you've been there, so you probably would understand it. It's a very duplicitous kind of a society. You would see that in their private parties, they'll be very, living a Western kind of a lifestyle, but when they go out, you just go like, oh, hang on, am I in Afghanistan or something? So there are two different worlds over there. So people in the elite class or people higher up, they don't care that much about religion, but they pay lip service to Islam, and you understand that, because if they didn't do it, then the things can get out of hand very quickly. But that's why we need to reach out to the masses, and that's where we're seeing, a major swell in the ranks.
Yeah, and you're saying you're getting letters from across the sort of socioeconomic spectrum. So, like I was running in the circles of people who were university educated, worked abroad. So, surprising to see that you're getting letters from even people in the poor community. So that must be quite time consuming for you to read all those letters from everybody. Let's take.
I don't see. I had a Facebook page. I had calculated around 1,000 messages. This is back in 2020, and that's when my Facebook was taken away. So I lost all those messages. But ever since then, like I only do on Instagram, and on my Instagram I only got 6,500 followers. That's the only platform where I communicate with people. Whereas otherwise, the other YouTube comments, I don't have time to read them. So even from those ones as well, like I've had maybe over 400 or 500 messages, and I only read them randomly. And sometimes, as I said, occasionally I check them. But yeah, you're right. Most of them actually come from, and they're very depressing as well. And I want to mention, obviously, what Atheist Alliance is doing. I think Atheist Alliance and Richard Dawkins, CFI, that's the only good feedback as far as atheist organizations go. I've only received good feedback about your two organizations. Because there is an army of refugees. I don't know if you've spoken with some of them. I think your organization is helping a couple of them. And these people have nothing. And sometimes, it becomes heavy for people like me as well. That just yesterday on my show, this guy came. He said, I've become an atheist. I've been watching you for about a year or so. Now I've become an atheist. Now he was kicked out of his house. He was on the run. He had a undergrad degree in IT. He was kicked out of his work. He was beaten up. And now he's on the run. And he's like, what do? I need to get out of Pakistan. And I'm like, wow, I can't do anything. And then obviously there is a route that you can follow. But you know how you probably know better than me, like how bad it is. Like if you claim asylum, it can take you 4 or 5 years in some other country, and you can wait forever. And who's going to look after you in that meantime? Because you're not allowed to work there. And that's where organizations like yourself, like Atheist Alliance and CFI, have helped a lot of people. I get these messages all the time as well. How, if they are in, let's say, Thailand or wherever they are, they need some money every month. Where do they get it from? So yeah, thanks to you guys as well.
Yeah, we try hard to help. We do get criticized that that's not the core platform that AAI was set up for, but movements evolve as the new atheist movement isn't what it was in 2006. It's much more today about ex-Muslims. The Christian world is kind of moved. It's like, yeah, whatever, and moved on. But it seems to be now is the time of the ex-Muslims to raise their voices. So
yeah, that's the only religion that actively hunts down dissidents. So you have political dissidents. Yes, that's bad pretty much everywhere. But then you have these religious dissidents. That's only Islam. That's the only one that just explicitly and even implicitly makes your life miserable. So even though it might not have been because of that, but yeah, you guys are just helping these people out. Maybe people may not be interested in, because it's happening in the far-flung Middle Eastern or Eastern countries, and people are not interested. And I noticed that too, because as a popularizer of these ideas, I also see sometimes we tend to ignore Malaysia and Indonesia. Sometimes we ignore the plight of ex-Muslims in African countries. And this is why I think the more diverse our movement gets, the better it's going to be. But I have this, not only just this gut feeling, I mean, I don't know if there's any other word, but I do have this gut feeling that we are winning this battle. It's people are recognizing it everywhere, whether that's Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Iran, what's going on there. And definitely I can speak a lot more about Pakistan. People know, people of power, they know something's happening, and they'll need to make quick adjustments, but there's nothing they can do.
Yeah. So with the letters you get, you get threats as well, I presume?
Surprisingly, I mean, I every now and then I do get some threats. Every now and then I do get some trolls who threaten me, and which is, again, I don't feel threatened at all. But sometimes people come after your family. That's when some, like I sometimes lose it. But surprisingly, I get more letters of encouragement. I think we have reached a saturation point where we have told Muslims that we're here. We're going to talk about this. If you don't like it, don't watch it. So a lot of people, when I hear these messages from a lot of people that, hey, for example, one of my friends, Usman Ayub, he went to this, he lives in America. He went to this Pakistani restaurant, and he was having this dinner with his wife. And he said that the table next to him, there was a table. There was this mom and dad and the two teenagers, and they were talking about atheism. And one of the guys was saying that I listened to Harris Sultan, for example. He said that. And my friend Usman says that he was shocked, and his wife was like, is he talking about your friend? So my point is that people are getting used to it. We probably are reaching that point. Yes, it's not there when something big is going to happen, when there's a massive cartoon movement or massive blasphemous movement. Yeah, you would see those reactions, but I think you would see Muslims getting desensitized towards criticism on Islam gradually. I reckon, because I don't get as many death threats as I would have thought. I don't. I've actually said it that when there's a cartoon, Charlie Hebdo or whatever, then you see protests in Pakistan, in the streets of Pakistan. But then you wonder, of every major Pakistani cleric that's worth mentioning, I've spoken to them privately on the phone in a very cordial manner, and it's quite amazing how when they talk to you, whatever they peddle publicly, totally different in private. they give you respect. There is no threat. There's no anger. There's no nothing. They're like, oh yeah, okay, you're talking about this, you're talking about that, and we talk. But then I wonder why. But these are the same people that they, like when they want to create a narrative, they're like, oh, this so and so has blasphemed against our beloved prophet. Then they go crazy. And then you see those effigies being burnt and cars being burnt in the streets of Lahore and Karachi. So so I think slowly they are getting desensitized. I think they know when to use it because it's a double-edged sword for them. If they mention my name, I've seen on national TV that they're discussing the rise of atheism in Pakistan, and they say there's YouTube, really? But they don't. But they don't mention me by name. Because if they do mention me by name, then obviously people are going to check out. So it's a double-edged sword for them. If they talk about me or us, people like us, then people are going to investigate it. People are going to try to find out more about us, and they're going to listen. They do tell them, if you see these atheists, just mute it. Don't click on it. Don't listen to what they have to say. So it's quite funny. But whether you turn up the heat all at once or just gradually keep turning it up, it's happening. And they've got no answers to it. And
so these clerics are actually willing to speak to you. So
yeah. No, not publicly. Yeah, not publicly. I have spoken to them privately. It's and you learn a lot more. There's one of the biggest Pakistani clerics. He's probably more interested in making YouTube ad money than let's say defending Islam. So he's got a huge viewership or whatever. So he had made some misogynistic videos in Urdu, and I thought, I threatened him. I said, I'm going to write to YouTube with timestamps and subtitles that this is exactly what you're saying, promoting child marriages, wife beating, the intellect is half. And I was quite angry that, like if somebody said those things in English, you'd cancel them. You'll go after them. They'll be gone. If people say anything, if they say something like that, even in not explicitly, but here it is. Are we? Do we not matter? Like, do Muslim or brown women don't matter? Don't they deserve respect? So I did it. I created a whole Word document. I wrote it to the biggest YouTube executives. I did the reporting and everything. So I was quite positive that his channel would be taken down. One of the videos was taken down, just one out of 11. So he got nervous and he sent me a message. So he never wanted to talk to me about Islam or atheism or anything, but he was like, hey, don't come after my channel, bro. But anyway, YouTube, as I said, this guy's got millions of subscribers and probably makes, we're talking about 70, 80K a month in ad revenue. So these are one of the major YouTube partners. So they didn't take any action against him. But it was just ironic that he was not interested in talking to me about Islam, but he was interested in talking to me about saving his ad revenue. So it's a totally messed up world. And this is what I try to tell. I obviously can't name him because it was something in private, but I think a lot of people would know who I'm talking about. But that's what I say, that these Muslims, they need to realize too that these people are being taken for a ride. Like if you look at, I don't know if you want to talk about this, like for example, Muhammad Hijab now, him talking to Jordan Peterson, and now he's talking to Andrew Tate. And these guys are just popularizers. They're more interested in their clout. They're not interested in telling the truth.
So when you talk to these other clerics, are you discussing Islam with them or atheists, or what's their concern that they would? Why would they even want to talk to you?
Well, because I reckon first time initially there was this novelty that who is this guy? Pakistan is like some other countries where there's certain topics that just off limits. You can have these naked dance parties and these alcohol fueled parties or whatever. You can have all of that, which is totally un-Islamic, but you do not mention the Prophet. If you say anything about the Prophet, it's all fair game. You could be lynched by a mob. So here I am just talking very candidly. I don't abuse the Prophet. I always call him the Prophet. To me, that it doesn't matter because it's just a self-proclaimed title. So, okay, if you want me to say it, because I don't want people to focus on my bad manners as opposed to my my message. So I do talk about him. I do mention him respectfully, but then I mention the hadith where Prophet used to sleep with all his wives in one night in a single bath. So I would say that, and I'd give it a little a comedy touch with it. So then people are like, whoa, hang on, what are you doing? So initially, a lot of these people were kind of, I think there was this novelty, and they were taken aback that who is this guy? Why? How can he say all of this thing? And people used to say, "You're so brave. You're so brave." And one thing led to another. Initially, yes, I was worried, but then I lost that as well. I've been through some really thick parts of London and Athens, where there are only Muslims there, and Pakistani Muslims, very conservative Orthodox Muslims. I've walked through them. I've been recognized a few times. I get recognized sometimes here and there, and then I usually, those people are okay. They're like, oh, okay, all right. They just talk to you. So it's not. I reckon this is why I said that I worry about my complacency, because one day someone might not be that polite. But you got to take that chance. But I think people are getting desensitized. So these scholars that do talk to me, they're like, okay, all right, let's just talk about it. Initially, they always come from the angle of, okay, you're misguided. Let me talk to you. For example, there's one very big cleric I was talking to, and I brought up wife beating. He said, oh, but the Prophet never beat any of his wives. I said, yeah, but other people around him did. And then he said, oh, yeah, those people were illiterate, they were ill-mannered. That's why the Prophet went there to correct them. I said, so are you saying Caliph Umar was an ill-mannered, like an uneducated kind of a person? And he was like, well, because you can't say that. You can say that about the ordinary companion of the Prophet. Vaguely, you can say, oh yeah, those guys ran away, they were cowards or whatever. But you're not, after Prophet Muhammad, you don't say anything about Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. You don't say these are the four sacred companions of the Prophet. But they all used to beat their wives, all of them. Maybe not Abu Bakr and Umar. Abu Bakr and Uthman. I don't think there's anything recorded. But Ali did later on. He had sex slaves. Umar beat his wife. It's in their own Sahih Hadiths. He used to beat up. He even beat up the sisters of Abu Bakr at his funeral because they were crying. He said, "Why are you crying? You're not supposed to cry at someone's passing." Aisha said, "No, don't talk to my auntie that way. Don't enter the house." So Umar had become a caliph. So he said, "No, screw you," and then they whipped her. So when Muslims don't know these kind of stories, it's written in their own books. So when you throw them these facts, they know them. Clerics know them, but they're like, "Oh, hang on, how does he know this?" So I think it was just a novelty that initially they wanted to talk, and I privately talk to them sometimes. It's just I think they're giving up. They're giving up.
Yeah. So when you're doing critiques on the Hadith in your earlier channel, this is the kind of stuff you're talking about, like these sort of problematic passages.
Oh yeah, problematic is an understatement. It's explicit. I've created this folder, and that folder has been growing constantly. It's on Google Drive, and it's got topics like sex in Islam, the sex life of the Prophet, things Prophet made up, justice in Islam, misogyny in Islam, slavery in Islam. So all these references, and I reckon the biggest mistake they ever made was digitizing their own filthy content. Sunnah.com. Just go to Sunnah.com. This is their own website with 6 or 7 hadith books. There are more hadith books as well, but the 7 most sacred books. You just put in something like, again, these are embarrassing hadith. How can, if someone who's so revered, like Prophet Muhammad, for example, if you mention Prophet Muhammad, you might have seen everyone says Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and sometimes they do this as well. He's so sacred. When you mention Prophet Muhammad, and then at the same time you've written details like how he used to go to bathroom, how he used to sleep with his wives when they were on their period, how many wives and how many baths he used to take after each sexual intercourse. You're like, you've written that in your own books. So sunnah.com, just put these keywords in. And then you put Jews in sunnah.com. You'll find out. If you see a Jew, put him in the narrowest part of the street. Oh, do the opposite of what Jews do. And women, if a donkey or a dog or a woman, if they walk in front of you, then your prayer is annulled. So these are the kind of things that they have said. They've written in their own books. Ordinary Muslims, are innocent Muslims, all they know is that Prophet Muhammad used to love his orphans. There was this woman who used to throw rubbish at the Prophet, and one day she didn't throw it, so he went up. He's like, oh, nobody's throwing rubbish at me today. Let me go and find out. And then he found out, oh, the old woman was sick. So he looked after her, and then she got better, and then she converted to Islam, which is, by the way, is a totally false story. It's the falsest story ever told. But every Muslim knows about the story. So Muslims have one image of the Prophet, and then what Prophet actually is written in their own books. And first, it used to be like in those old school books, who's going to go to a madrasa, who's going to investigate it, no one's got time for it. Now you just got to go sunnah.com. So they've done it themselves. Quran.com, go there, search for keywords, infidels or whatever you want to look up. You'll find all the literature. You will find the commentaries of learned and esteemed scholars like Ibn Kathir or Al-Jalalain, etc., well-accepted scholars. So I always say that people say that, oh, this is your interpretation or whatever. I actually, to be honest, I'm not a believer of, going with these other Orientalist interpretations, like, oh, Petra might have been the original Mecca, or like all these kind of conspiratorial kind of ideas about Islam. I say Islam is so poorly concocted that just go by what they are saying. That alone, the instance of Safiya, when Khaybar, one of the Jewish tribes, when that was conquered by the Prophet, the tribal chief's daughter Safiya, when he was murdered, when her husband was murdered and her brother was murdered, Safiya went to some ordinary companion, some ordinary jihadi. So someone told the Prophet that, oh, she's very beautiful, I think you should have her. So Prophet saw her, and Prophet's like, oh, give her to me, you can have two in place of her. So when Prophet consummated, it wasn't a marriage at that point. There's a disagreement in that, so I would leave it to them. Again, I'm not going to apply my own interpretation. But when the Prophet slept with her, there was a man standing outside the tent. So when the Prophet woke up, he said, oh, you've been guarding my tent, why? And the guy said, oh, dear Prophet, you have just murdered her father, her husband, and a brother. So I thought that she would kill you at some stage. Now, this is just their own story. It's written in Ibn Ishaq, the biography of the Prophet. And you ask them, when you put these explicitly written stories in front of Muslims, they're shocked. And all of this is their own interpretations. Kirfa, who was Kirfa? She was an old Jewish woman. She was she was tied to camels, and they were told to run in the opposite direction. She was cut in half. It's written in Ibn Ishaq and Tabri. These kind of brutal stories. How can you then say that this was a man of mercy, etc.? So, and I think this is probably a far better approach than giving them an idea that is not even accepted by the Muslim scholarship.
Interesting. So you're saying, like, because this information is out there, it's digitized, it's the information age, that the people now can see it for themselves. Maybe they didn't necessarily pick it up, and you have to read through everything you can keyword search on these sites and find these things. So it's kind of like the nail in their own coffin.
There's another nail coming in their own coffin, but I think they might have learned something. So people like me, who are self-learned, people who just sunnah.com and the Quran.com, and then you read the critique of people and then you verify it. So that's one thing. Okay, this is very basic level. It gets messy when you actually go in the Islamic jurisprudence and the fiqh, when you go in the Shafi, Maliki, Hanbali, what muftis do, when you go into that, that's when it actually gets really, really problematic. That's when they actually tell you that how you have to have intercourse and, like explicit, filthy detail. So I'm just waiting for them to digitize that. Now, that is still in the traditional book form. Most of that is still in Arabic, and it hasn't been translated, etc. But because we're getting ex-Muslims from the madrasas as well, muftis. I had this guy. He had like something like 90,000 subscribers, and he was an Islamic apologist. Traditional Islamic apologist, had studied in a madrasa. I don't know. I don't think he was a mufti, but he was maybe a small-time imam or something. But he was educated enough. So he read my book and he said, "I'm gonna debunk your book." So while he was writing the refutation of my book, halfway through, he lost it. He lost his faith, and then he reached out to me and he said, "I was writing a refutation to your book. But I have become an atheist now." And then he sometimes sends me some stuff from the scholars version, which is totally oblivious to me. And for example, let me tell you this funny story. I'm sorry, you might think that, like, why is it so sexually explicit? I'm saying that. I'm telling you all these sexually explicit details from the Quran, from Islam, is because there's a totally different worldview of Islam in the Muslim world. When you think about Islam, you think that, it's a very sexually regressive society. Yes, but only for women. Yeah, they cover them up. They put them in niqabs, and the women are not allowed to go outside, blah, blah, blah. But roles reversed, men were totally opposite to that. So you've heard of the name Al-Ghazali in Al-Ghazali's book, and I've shown the screenshots of that many times. Al-Ghazali writes that Caliph Umar, now this is the second or third most revered figure in Islam after Prophet Muhammad, the second caliph of the Ummah. Now again, this is not in the Hadith book or anything. This is what we call tertiary level books. But these guys like Al-Ghazali, they're very well respected amongst Sunni Muslims. They say, so Al-Ghazali writes that Caliph Umar, to break his fast, he used to, like in the month of Ramadan, you just you don't eat from dawn till dusk, and then when it's time to break your fast, you break your fast and you eat food. You haven't eaten all day, you haven't drank all day, so you'd assume that, okay, this is what you'd be hungry for. Al-Ghazali writes that Caliph Umar would break his fast by having sex with his sex slave. And then it further on explains that sometimes he would have sex with 3 up to 4 sex slaves. And then it explains to you that why he did that. He did that so he can get all the other carnal desires out of the way, so he could then devote himself in worshipping Allah for the rest of the night. Now, Muslims haven't heard these kind of things. I mean, this is like, they think that, our Prophet was so shy, he wouldn't even look at the women. Quran says that don't look at women. Here's this guy Umar that you respect so much. He once whipped a concubine of someone because she covered herself up. She dressed up like a Muslim, so she wore a hijab, and then beat her up. He said, "No, you're not to dress up like free women." So I think it's going to get worse when we see these tertiary level books, the fiqh books, digitized.
And that's coming. So
it's coming.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Al-Ghazali was one of the primary movers that sort of killed off the Islamic golden age of science. He wrote a book called The Incoherence of the Philosophers, and it was attacking people like,
called it work of the devil.
Yeah, and so
they call it a work of the devil, but I don't fully. He was very influential. Yes, a lot of skeptics were killed at that time. Most commonly they were called Mutazilites. So their whole doctrine and philosophy was reason over revelation. So they were destroying, and they were quite educated on the Hellenistic philosophy. They were translating that in the Arabic language, and but they were, and then eventually they just disappear, and that is roughly the time when the so-called golden age of Islam disappeared. But also there's some other factors as well, like the Mongols and so forth.
Yeah. So it's coming. So the Islamic Enlightenment is coming, you think? If it's not already.
I think it's. Oh yeah, I think it's already there. I cannot see. I mean, I used to say that some of us probably will have to die, but I'm thinking that it's coming even faster than that. I mean, they might not even be able to get most of us, if some of us.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the demographic shift is underway, and as you said, like the journalists, the politicians, they see the writing on the wall. I think specifically in Iran, I think the leaders in Iran are probably definitely worried that this is a much bigger groundswell than they've seen before, and it's coming from women and teenagers, and not just the middle class. So it's interesting to see how this is going to play out in Iran. If this is going to be a sea change, or if they'll crack down.
It would be very interesting, because a lot of people now say, although I'm not an expert on this, but a lot of people say that Iranian revolution was also a big part, even though it was Shia version of Islam. So you would think that it should not have had that much of an impact on Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, which is Sunni-dominated countries. But quite a lot of funny things happened in 1979. So obviously the Iranian revolution came, and then Saudi Arabia also started pumping out petrodollars and started creating madrasas all around the world. And that matured up 15, 20 years later. And some people could say, that probably why what even September 11 happened as well. A lot of people relate that to that. And obviously Mujahideen and the Afghanistan Taliban, but also the radicalization of Pakistan happened as well. We blame General Zia-ul-Haq, who also came to power roughly around 1978, who was an Islamist, the only Islamist Pakistani general, who for the first time in the history of Pakistan, and the only time in the history of Pakistan, introduced corporal punishments like chopping off their hands and whipping adulterers, etc. And then obviously when he died, thankfully, in a plane crash, a lot of people say CIA was involved. I don't care even if it was, but then those laws were repealed again. So a lot of people say that Iran was probably responsible, because now we have this purely Islamic, although a Shia doctrine state. So, well, obviously, when your enemy or when your rival does something, then you have to match it. So Saudi Arabia felt the need to export these petrodollars, because they were worried that now there is a state, Islamic State, Shia Islamic State in place. They would export their influence, Shia influence, and then that's how. So that's how Pakistan ended up getting. But there's another factor of that is involved, is the fact that Soviet Union also invaded Afghanistan, and the United States also joined in, and they said, okay, yeah, we need Mujahideen, we need Salafi and Wahhabi Islam. So all of these things actually happened in 78, 79. But now fast forward 42 years later, Iranians have lived under this, under this hammer, or under this iron fist of Islam. They're sick of it. And when I speak with Mariam Namazi or Amin Navabi, a lot of these Iranian people, they say that even moderately religious people are standing with secularists, or people who believe that, okay, the state should have no business with religion. So that's going to be very interesting, if maybe not this time, but maybe next time, with each set of protests, the Islamic regime is actually weakening. The hijab would definitely be gone. A lot of people say now, so because the grip, it's either the hijab or risk losing power in Iran. So it's getting weakened. But unfortunately, the situation is a bit different in Pakistan. Pakistani establishment has never been dogmatically religious. They use religion. Yes, it's a conservative, traditionalist kind of a society, but they don't necessarily believe in Islamic state and a theocracy. They don't necessarily believe in that, even though it is called Islamic Republic of Pakistan. But you can only pay lip service to these kind of things for so long without actually getting real life impact. So we see that traditionalists, more hardcore Islamist kind of people, politicians with that kind of a narrative, are kind of getting more popular. For example, TLP. You might remember when this French cartoon saga happened with Macron and all that. You might have seen there were so many protests in Lahore and Karachi, and Imran Khan's government at that time, who pretends to be the champion of the Muslim Ummah. His government killed 200 to 250 TLP workers who were saying that, you just need to expel this guy. So they hold hardcore Islamist traditional worldview, who say that when we come to power. So there is a worry that kind of a narrative is actually getting more and more popular in Pakistan, where traditionally they only used to get 2 to 3% of the votes, but it still hasn't translated in votes. But it is you could argue that the turnout that you see of these kind of people is becoming visibly larger and larger with each passing year. There is a conspiracy theory that the founding father of this movement, TLP, he was probably killed by the Pakistani establishment. We don't know. It could be COVID. We don't know. But his son has become his successor, and he tends to be even more hardline than him. He tends to be even more charismatic than him. He turns out to pull even bigger crowds than his late father. So there is a threat. I do worry that things are going to get worse in Pakistan before they get better, as opposed to Iran, where things are going to get better.
So despite the fact that you're seeing a growing swell of non-believers in Pakistan, you think the radicals are going to have their day first?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, our increasing number is still very small when you compare it with the radicals. But the bigger problem is, it could be a race against time, because it's likely that the current establishment or the current status quo, we are likely to get a lot more atheists amongst themselves. And this one, unfortunately, Imran Khan turned out to be a massive, massive disappointment, because I would have thought that a lot of us would have thought that he would have taken a more of a centrist line, but he turned out to be any other desperate politician who uses Islamist. He peddled Islam whenever it suited him. He's even been caught on hot mic, being advised by one of his political workers that, give it a bit more Islamic touch. Like you're just giving that, just make it a bit more Islamic, so people will listen to you a bit more. So he was caught on hot mic. So he turned out to be a disappointment. But the other two parties, they always take a bit more centrist position. They don't invoke religion as much as Imran Khan does. But unfortunately, Imran Khan is probably the most popular politician in Pakistan right now. The other major player is the army. And now we hear that there's a major divide in the army as well. Remember, I just mentioned General Ziaul Haq, the only Islamist Pakistani military general. Other than him, all of them turned out to be kind of a bit less interested in Islam. General Musharraf, General Ayub, etc. So it's a toss of a coin. Who is going to be the next military general? We are one radical military general away from seeing an abrupt rise in radical Islamism in Pakistan. There's going to be a new military general in November. We don't know who it's going to be. Possibly he would be like a traditional Pakistani military general who is neither here nor there. It's just not going to touch the topic of religion. But as I said, we don't know. If it turns out to be a Islamist like General Ziaul Haq, he would have a political party right at his disposal to play with, the TLP. Everyone knows every political party in Pakistan comes to power with the support of the military establishment. So I think we're just, and this is why the United States is constantly worried. People get so angry that why the United States is talking about Pakistan's internal affairs or whatever. This is why the United States is always worried, and hence the Joe Biden's recent statement as well, that we're worried about the nuclear weapons. Because what would happen if TLP comes to power? His father actually said it. I know it's funny when they say it, but it's a different thing when they come to power. But his father once said, he said, hey, listen up, the West. He was addressing the West. And he said, listen up. Don't pester us with all the loans that you've given to us. Write them off, or wait until we have we have enough money. Otherwise, we're sending you nukes. He said it, But that guy is he died, but his son was even a bigger hardliner than him. He is waiting in the wings. People underestimate. People say that, oh no, this will never happen, because it hasn't happened. Pakistan has never had a religious political party come to power. They never got any considerable amount of votes, but this can happen. I'm right here. I worry the day, but it can happen. People are taking it. People say no, just because it hasn't happened, and they think it won't happen. It can happen, but the other possibility is also there. So I don't want to scare you, but there's a ray of hope that if we keep making these changes, because the bureaucracy, the existing bureaucracy, the current political elite, they don't actually care as much about Islam.
Yeah,
they always try to. They always try to subtly keep bringing in new legislation, like and not Imran Khan, but like domestic violence bill, anti-domestic violence bill, a bill for the protection of the minorities, etc. They always try to subtly do it, but it never goes through the Senate, because if the clerics find out about it, then they stage protest and they say, okay, sorry, we didn't mean it. So they're constantly doing it. But again, it's just a matter of tipping point. How many non-religious politicians are we going to end up getting in the parliament? And the other elephant in the room is obviously this Frankenstein monster that Pakistan has created, which is in the East India. India is not a threat, but they keep saying that it's a threat. So that's a totally different ballgame topic to discuss.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a minefield. So lots of competing interests. So okay. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, thank you very much for having me. This is it's been interesting, and keep doing what you guys are doing. Amazing work. I always say, I do feel personally responsible sometimes when we get these letters and we say, well, I've left Islam, but now I either live this dishonest life, pretend to fast, pretend to pray, or I want to get out of this. And then these people end up becoming very depressed. So, we don't have advocacy groups like other Christian groups or Ahmadi groups or, all kind of other communities. I know you guys are doing amazing work. But we need a lot more of that. Otherwise, there's an army of these people coming, and then you also wonder how many of these people can we take them out of Pakistan, or they should just stay there and make Pakistan better. It's just it's pretty bad. I don't want to end it on a negative note, but it is a real possibility. I think things are going to get worse before they get better. Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to having you on again in the future. We can see how things go. Maybe after this new general comes to power, and we can resync and see what the situation is. So, okay,
absolutely. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Harris, for coming on. And I'd like to remind everybody, please like and subscribe, and we'll see everybody on the next show. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks for listening, and don't forget we're on YouTube, so follow us on YouTube. Just search for Atheist Alliance International and please subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're also on all of your favourite podcast platforms, so make sure that you follow us on there as well. See you next time.